Hey guys, hello and welcome back. All right, so I know that you guys just had your first exam and you also have an upcoming SAQ, and then you've got another exam next week. And so I know you're probably a little stressed. So I apologize for that, but all of this stuff is going to help your grade. All of this is going to make you a better student in AP World History. And I am so proud of all of y'all for all of the adversity you guys have faced this year and how you are overcoming it. So, without further ado, I'm going to begin my lesson. And I promise this one's a little bit shorter, okay? So, let's begin. All right, guys. So, probably taken attendance. As you can see, we're still doing period 2, although these dates are wrong, guys. I messed that one up. So this should be 1450 to 1750. So ignore that. But we are still doing Unit 4, Transoceanic Networks. So we've been doing Unit 4 for a few days now because it's really important. These European maritime-based empires are exceptionally important to world history. So a lot of you guys probably already get that we're talking about the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British, the Dutch, and the French. So for this class, we're going to continue talking about how Europe kind of changes the world. All right, so we'll begin with a little meme of the day. We'll build upon what we talked about last class, which was the Columbian Exchange. And today we're going to talk more about a change in continuity. So on our first lesson for period 2, we talked about change in continuity. It's one of the 3 historical thinking skills that you need to know for AP World. So we're going to do more of that today. We're going to talk about labor systems. We're going to talk about how labor systems throughout the world have changed or continued from period 1 to period 2. So if you have any questions, send me an email about that because this is really important, okay? And at the end of class, I've got an in-class assignment for you. So if you are missing class, just send me a quick email, okay? All right, guys, so memes of the day. Yes, the infamous Oprah meme. Everybody loves this one. Yes, the Columbian Exchange, definitely a lot of positives to the world, but certainly a lot of negatives as well. All right. I know some of you are fans of Marvel. Yes, another time we get to look at the Columbian Exchange map. Okay. All right, so I hope you guys like these. Now, the reason I'm showing you this slide, guys, is because, again, we are talking about historical thinking skills and we're talking about change and continuity. So again, for our first class about period 2, I showed you this slide and I asked you guys to think about how Europe changes from period 1 to period 2. Okay, so obviously you guys don't have to write this down, but I wanted you to remember what this slide looked like. I wanted you guys to think about change and continuity because we're going to do the same thing today. We're going to talk about how a system, labor systems have changed. Okay, this is really important. So we're going to go ahead, and I did not have time to make a meme for you guys, so I'm sorry about that. But again, you don't have to write this. But while I am lecturing, I do need you guys to think about the difference between labor systems in period 1 and labor systems in period 2. So what is a labor system? Well, at their most basic definition, a labor system is essentially how laborers and employers work together. So if you guys remember, in period 1, we talked about feudalism in Europe. So we talked about how you had the social hierarchy, you had the king at the top, the lords, the knights, and then the serfs, okay? And the relationship between the serfs and everyone else was that they grew food for safety, essentially. All right, we also talked about the Midas system. So at the end of period 1, we talked about the Americas. Do you remember? And I told you that the Midas system was the Incan form of a public tax. So you worked a certain amount of days each year to build infrastructure for the Incan Empire. Okay, so that's all period 1 stuff. Now I want you guys to keep that in mind because That's going to change, okay? But it's also going to stay the same. And I want you guys to figure out how these labor systems change between period 1, 1200 to 1450, and period 2, 1450 to 1750, okay? All right, so we've moved on to topic 4.6. All right, so global labor system and their continuities. So things that are going to stay the same, guys. All right, so in Europe and in China, peasant and artisan labor is going to intensify. So we said that peasant in Europe, peasant is kind of the same word for serfs. So if you are at the bottom of that hierarchy in your feudalistic society, even though feudalism doesn't last, if you're a peasant, you're still going to be a peasant in period 2. All right, so people who are at the lowest of the social hierarchy in Europe are going to stay the same. So people are going to still continue to labor on large farms for another person, okay? And the same thing's going to happen in China. So artisan labor. So what is an artisan? An artisan is someone who creates very like handicrafts. So silk, for example, okay? So if you're a silk weaver in period 1, probably going to be a silk weaver in period 2. So what you'll see is that the peasants in both Europe and in China, all right, are going to stay the same. There's not really going to be social mobility in these places. So instead, what you'll see is that in China, peasants are actually going to be in producing more for the global market. So in period 1 China, peasants are indeed creating silk, all right, and it is going to be traded on the Indian Ocean trading route or on the Silk Road. But by period 2, global trade is going to pick up, which means peasants are going to be expected to be creating more silk. All right, this is actually a cool little picture here of a silk weaver. All right, it's a very difficult job. Okay. Again, a good example of this continuity is what you see in China. So in period 1, during the Song Dynasty, people that were silk weavers, okay, they worked very hard. They were kind of the bottom. But by the time we get to period 2, the Song Dynasty is going to have fallen and it's going to be replaced by the Ming Dynasty. Okay. And the Ming Dynasty will also be, peasants will be producing lots and lots of silk. And this silk will be used for export. So people will be sending silk onto European boats and sending it to Europe or to the Americas. Okay. So is this a change or continuity? Well, we said it's a continuity. Okay. All right, another change or continuity. Well, I've kind of given this away for you guys. Another continuity, okay? So over the past week or two, we have talked about the transatlantic slave trade. And so we've talked about how enslaved peoples will be taken out of West Africa and brought to the New World. So they'll be brought to work on sugar plantations in Brazil or sugar plantations in the Caribbean, okay? Eventually the 13 colonies. Well, in period 1, guys, you do have to write this, guys, don't ignore that. In period 1, we talked about the East Indian Ocean slave route, okay? We've talked about this, how East African city-states collected people and traded them to Muslim merchants in the Middle East and South Asia. Well, guys, in period 2, that's going to continue to happen, okay? So at this point, in period 2, you're going to have 2 enslaved people trades. You'll have the East Indian Ocean slave trade as well as the transatlantic slave trade, okay? This transatlantic slave trade will actually cease in period 3. You don't have to know this yet, but this slave trade, guys, is going to continue all the way until the 1960s, okay? So this is going to be a very long continuity. So East African slaves, remember, coming out of these little city-states, these trading posts now, the Portuguese, are going to be sold into slavery to Europeans as well as Muslim merchants. And they will be brought into the Middle East, South Asia, as well as North Africa. So this will be a continuity, okay? All right, so as I said to you guys, you have not only the East African slave trade, but you also have the West African slave trade, which we now know as the Transatlantic slave trade. Now, I know that over the past week or two, you have seen like 4 or 5 pictures that kind of show this huge amount of African enslaved people that are removed from West Africa and taken to the Caribbean and Brazil and later to the 13 colonies. And if I show you guys this map that many times, you probably should note how important it is, okay? So you definitely need to know that the transatlantic slave trade is going to bring millions and millions of people. In fact, it is estimated that over 20 million West African enslaved peoples will leave this area of the world and be brought to the New World, will be brought to sugar plantations in Brazil, to sugar plantations in the Caribbean, and to tobacco and rice plantations up in the 13 colonies, okay? So there's something that you guys need to write down, and you need to write down because College Board wants you to know what it means. So there's lots of different types of forced labor. So in period 1, we talked about feudalism, and I talked about the serfs. And I said that, well, they were not enslaved. It was coerced labor, okay? So when you guys think about slavery, I know most of you probably think about African enslaved peoples who were brought to the United States to work on cotton, sugar, tobacco farms, okay? And so the slavery that you all think about actually has a name, and that is this right here, guys, chattel slavery. So chattel slavery essentially removes the humanity from the person. So chattel slavery basically means that the person is property. So the transatlantic slave route is actually going to take all of these enslaved peoples from Western Africa, and they're going to turn them into chattel slavery, where they're going to treat them as property, okay? So again, this is why I personally do not use the word slave. I use enslaved person because I wanted to note that it's a condition. But you do need to understand what this definition is. This is kind of one of those you should star it kind of things, because there's lots of different coerced conditions of forced labor, and chattel slavery is when a person is literally created into or turned into property. Okay, so they are owned by another person. Okay. Change or continuity? Well, in period 2, this is a change. Okay, so the transatlantic slave trade is not happening in period 1. All right, the East African slave trade is. All right, so it's a continuity of enslavement coming out of Africa, but it's a change because this is a whole new slave trade. Okay. Okay, guys, so at the end of period 1, I spent like 5 minutes talking about the Americas with you. All right, and I told you guys about, I specifically looked at the Incans. All right, the Incans are super interesting, okay? They are one of the several Amerindian tribes that are in this new world when Columbus discovers it. And they are also a Amerindian tribe that does not fare so well against the Spanish. So, as we've talked about a few times already, the Spanish, after the Treaty of Tordesillas, the Spanish will kind of go ahead and take over that huge swath of territory from kind of like from Alaska all the way down to Argentina. So that huge land. All right. And so any of these Amerindian groups that live there will suddenly become citizens of the Spanish Empire, and it will not go well for them. So we talked about on Monday or Tuesday about how the Columbian Exchange kind of really kind of kills off a lot of these people with smallpox as well as other really deadly diseases. So we said 95% of the Amerindians are going to die because of the Columbian Exchange. So it's kind of one of those darker facts about the Columbian Exchange. And those that survive will live an awful, horrible, horrific life. Okay. So as we said, guys, the Spanish are going to exploit resources out of the Americas. And one of the things that they're going to be able to exploit is silver. So as we said, the Spanish will export silver to the Philippines to trade with the Ming Dynasty in China. Okay? So, sugar extraction is really hard and awful, but the extraction of silver is even worse. Okay? Now, I want you to take a step back for a second. All right? Why are the Spanish using Amerindians and not African enslaved peoples? Let's think about it. All right. Think about the Treaty of Tordesillas. All right. Anything on that other side of the line was for Portugal. So the Spanish really don't have any trading posts in West Africa. Okay. They don't have the access to enslaved African peoples. So instead, all they have really are these Amerindian groups, the ones that survived sort of the smallpox and measles and typhoid, all those awful diseases. So that's pretty much all the Spanish have left. Okay. And so what the Spanish are going to do is they're going to take that metis system. Do you guys remember the metis system that the Incans used? The labor tax, in which Incans were required to, farming was really easy in the Incan Empire. So they were required to give a certain amount of days each year to the empire to do infrastructure, road building, monumental architecture building. Yeah. So the Spanish are going to warp that. Okay, they're going to take that labor system from period 1 and they're going to bend it to their own will. So they're going to force these surviving Incans and Amerindian groups to mine silver at Mount Potosi. So as I said, guys, the Spanish find a literal mountain of silver called Mount Potosi. And these poor natives are going to be forced to mine, which is way worse than sugar mining or sugar extraction. It's dark, cramped conditions. Mining is extremely dangerous and they're not getting paid. They're forced to do this because it's part of this labor tax. So the Spanish, in addition to this awful mining system, the Spanish are also going to create these two things right here, the hacienda and the encomienda systems. Now, at the end of class, you will receive a reading assignment in which you will need to take notes on these two systems, but I will not go over them. But is this all a change or continuity? It's a change and a continuity, right? The metis system is something that existed in period 1, but once the Spanish go ahead and warp it, it does change a little bit, right? So you guys need to understand that when the Europeans are going to come in, they're going to take these labor systems and they're going to change them to fit their own needs, okay? So this is a interesting depiction, actually, the new metis system, whereby these surviving Amerindians, these surviving Incans are going to be forced to mine silver. They're not going to be paid at all. And obviously silver mining is not a fun job. They don't have the kind of equipment we have today for mining, even though mining today is considered a pretty awful job. So it's a terrible system. And again, the Spanish are going to have to use the Amerindians because they do not have access to enslaved people from West Africa. Okay. Okay, guys, so as I said, the encomienda and hacienda systems, you're going to have a reading assignment in which you're going to have to take your own notes today. And I will go over that at the end of class. But you will need to know these definitions and you will need to know what they mean. Okay, guys, so more changes and more continuities. So in period 1, we talked a lot about caste systems. We talked about the caste system in South Asia, right? We talked about the Brahmins at the top and, the untouchables at the bottom. All right, we also talked about the feudalistic system in Europe. All right, we talked about the kings, the lords, the knights, and then the serfs at the bottom. Okay. We didn't talk about a caste system in the Americas because there really wasn't one. Sure, you had a system where you had an emperor, and the Incans had an emperor, and then everyone else was kind of at the bottom, but it wasn't a strict caste system. But when the Spanish come into the Americas, they're going to create a new hierarchy. So it's going to be a continuity for the Europeans, but it's going to be a change for the Amerindians. So when the Europeans are going to come into Latin America, they're going to inflict this color-based hierarchy. Okay, they're going to create the Spanish casta. So casta is a Spanish word for caste. All right, so a casta is a system of hierarchy based on skin color. So those caste systems that we saw in South Asia and the feudalistic system we saw in Europe, it was not based on skin color. No, it was based on kind of where you were born and what job your parents had. The Spanish are going to change this though. In Latin America, your place in society is going to be based on your skin color and the blood that your parents gave you. Okay. So as you guys can see from this, I'm going to go to the next page, but I promise this will be here. As you guys can see from this, the very pinnacle, the very top of society are going to be the peninsulares. All right. Peninsulares is peninsula. All right. I think it's a cognate for peninsula. It's going to be people who were born in Spain. So those first explorers that come into South America, they're going to be at the top of the food chain. All right. They are going to be the top because they were actually born in Spain. All right. They're actual of Spanish blood. But eventually, they're all going to die off. Okay. And what they're going to do is they're going to leave behind their children. Okay. And their children are not all going to be, or they're not going to be peninsulares because they're going to have been born in Latin America. Okay. So eventually, peninsulares are going to go away and you're going to be stuck with this caste system instead. So the top of the food chain are going to be the Creoles. All right, so Creoles are those of European ancestry. So usually their father was a peninsulare and their mother was either a native Indian or, not a native Indian, excuse me, or of like enslaved person mixture. So they were kind of, their skin color was much darker. So they had, Spanish blood, but also African blood as well. Okay. So just below them were going to be people of Spanish heritage that had mixed with Indians. So these were basically going to be people whose father was a peninsulare, whose mother were Amerindians. Okay. And these people were going to be on the same caste as people whose were already mestizos, but also had some black mixture. Okay. So it's really hard to explain. So their parents were already going to be mestizos and they were possibly going to have also like black mixture as well. And then at the very bottom of all of this, you're going to have native Indians and black enslaved people. So the only way to actually go up in a caste system was if you were a black slave and you had a relationship with a peninsulare, your children could be located in this middle bit. Okay. It's the same with Native Indians. If you were born in this bottom caste system, you're never going to leave it. But your children, if you have children with a peninsulare or a Creole, they will move up the castes. Okay. So you guys need to understand what this caste system, this colonial class system means for the Americas. So obviously at the top, you're going to have Creoles, and they're going to be the ones that control everything. They'll usually be the ones in government, social institutions, and the economic systems. So they'll be making all the money. All right, this middle group of mestizos, which I believe in Spanish means mixed, they're going to be kind of the closest to what we have as a middle class. They could learn a trade and they could own land, but it wasn't going to be given to them like it would be given to these Creoles. Okay. And then, of course, you had the people at the bottom. You had the lowest group. You had enslaved people and Native Amerindians. And so, guys, as we said, this is going to be a major change for the Americas. This is not going to be a continuity. All right. This is actually going to be a change even for European caste systems, because now all of a sudden this class system is going to be based on race. It's not going to be based on what your parents did or what, if they were farmers or if they owned the lord land. So hierarchies are going to be created based on your skin color. Okay, guys, shifting gear a little bit. We're still talking about change and continuity, guys. Religious beliefs. Now, we've talked a lot about this already. When you look at a map of Europe and you look at all the places that they influenced, you're going to see that Europeans, especially these European maritime-based empires, are going to bring belief systems to the Americas, okay? So you're going to see Catholicism and Protestantism spread to the Americas. So you guys are probably familiar with a picture like this. So this is Europeans bringing Protestantism. All right, these are the Puritans. They're bringing Protestantism into the Americas. Okay, this is a Catholic priest bringing in Catholicism to the Americas. So again, backing up just a little bit, when you think about those 5 European empires, you guys should be able to remember which 3 were Catholic and which 2 were Protestant. All right, so for Catholics, we have the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the French. And for Protestant, we have the Dutch and the British. And so these empires are going to bring their respective religious beliefs into the Americas. So prior to this, we have native religions. And so we're going to have a change now. All right, these Europeans are going to force these native groups to convert. All right, they're going to change their religions and convert to Catholicism or Protestantism. Okay. All right, so more about these religious beliefs in America. Okay. So when we were talking about Africa a few weeks ago, when we were talking about syncretism, I told you guys a little bit about this right here, voodoo. Okay. Voodoo is probably the most prominent syncretic religion that comes out of Africa. It's going to be a mix of Christianity as well as native local African beliefs. Okay, so what will happen is that during the transatlantic slave trade, African people will be taken to the Americas. Okay, they'll be taken to Brazil and they'll be taken to the Caribbean. Okay, and so when they get there, they will have brought with them their native African beliefs. And when they get to these places, the Europeans will force them to become Christians. And so what they'll do is they'll kind of take their native beliefs and mix them with Christianity. And they will create this thing called Vodun, which, as you guys probably know, is voodoo. And this is a creepy picture, a creepy little thing of voodoo thing. Okay. And so you guys know probably about the dolls, the pins, and voodoo relies heavily on Christianity, but it also has some spiritual aspects of native African beliefs. Okay. So syncretism is pretty common when it comes to Africa as well as the Americas. You're also going to see in the Americas, South America in particular, natives as well as mestizos are going to take their own native beliefs, they're like Incan, Mayan, those beliefs, and they're going to meld them a little bit with Catholic beliefs. So you're going to get some syncretic versions of like holidays, all right? You'll see that even today, if you go to Mexico, for example, you will see that Jesus is often portrayed as Latino, all right? And another thing is Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is a syncretic Christian belief that melds with local native beliefs, okay? So it's going to be Catholicism as well as kind of like local American religious beliefs, and that's what you'll get Mardi Gras from, okay? All right, so last slide, guys. I know this is kind of, we're kind of going all over the place today, but we got to get a few things in, okay? Actually, let me go back really quick. So these religious beliefs in America, guys, you do need to know that this syncretism is a change because obviously you're going to have native religions and you're going to have Catholicism or Protestantism, and it's going to change these beliefs, okay? So you guys might have heard of maroon societies. You know, every time I watch like Castaway or a movie where people claim that they're marooned on a desert island, I always think about this because it's not really the correct usage of a maroon society. So what a maroon society actually is not some person who's been kind of like left on a desert island to starve to death. No, but close. So I want you guys to know that when Africans are brought to the New World on this transatlantic slave trade, they don't just give up, okay? Lots of enslaved peoples will try to fight back. And one way that they will be able to fight back successfully is by escaping. So you're going to see on these islands in the Caribbean pockets of groups of people. Okay, you're going to see groups of escaped enslaved peoples that actually form their own societies. And so you'll see on like major islands, usually kind of in the swamps, the areas that are uninhabited by Europeans, kind of land that nobody wants to go to, you will see maroon societies. So again, escaped enslaved peoples that form their own like little political states outside of the European control. And yes, sometimes Europeans do go and try to re-enslave these people, but often they will be left alone, okay? Often that they are doing their own thing and they'll be left alone. Okay, so, but I do need you guys to know that these like people, not all people that were brought over from on the transatlantic slave trade, some people did fight back. Okay, and this is one way of fighting back. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm going to go over the in-class work for you guys a little bit in greater depth. But I do need, for those of you who are missing my lesson, I do need you to go to this website. And this PowerPoint will be on Canvas if you don't want to type that long thing in. And this is going to be an AP World History article from another AP World History teacher. Okay, it's long, but what I need you guys to do, rather than give me another writing sample or do another quiz, I need you to go ahead and read this, and I need you to have the bolden words in your notes. So if it's a bold word, it should be in your notes. So you should be experts on the encomienda and hacienda systems after you read this, okay? You will need to have this done. This is something that is very important, and this might be on your test next week. So this is not something you should skip, okay? It shouldn't take you that long, but you should be taking notes on this, okay? And also, don't forget, your review guides are up on Canvas, and you should be able to complete almost all of your questions about Unit 4. Don't save this until the night before your Period 2 test. You don't need to, okay? All right, guys, so quick lesson. If you have any questions, go ahead and send them my way, and if not, I will see y'all next time in class.